morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the second show of the week of the Velocity of Now on a Sunday, the Sunday sermon, going out all over the world on Thomas Sheridan Arts on YouTube for hopefully the rest of the season. I'm going to do my best to do at least 2 shows a week. I know it's a big commitment, but why not? Let's have a go. The demand is out there. You keep asking me for more and more, and I've got a big mouth and a lot to give, so why not? I hope you're all keeping well on this Sunday. Those of you who are not in church, praying to your God or gods or whatever you do today. I hope you're all keeping well. It's quite nice weather here at the moment. I can't really complain too much about it. I hope the weather is nice where you are. Now, I've been just thinking about these kind of Sunday morning shows, and the approach might be a little different than the Thursday night show. Maybe it won't, and maybe it'll just evolve into something similar or something different. I don't know. But I'll try to keep the tone down. The idea is that this will go out after dinner in Western Europe, and when you're waking up with a hangover in North America. And so this is what I'm aiming for here, to try and cater to those 2 demographics, alcoholics and alcoholics. Now, as it's a Sunday, I'll try to ease some of you in a bit more calmly, but I can't help thinking about recent events in Germany, and particularly Angela Merkel's comments about Germans need to stock up for 10 days of food and water in case of a terrorist attack. Well, if the terrorist attack happens, it's her fault because she invited them all in. But it was just a weird announcement. And I think it was gaslighting. I don't think it was anything other than that. I think it was gaslighting. And I think it was some kind of desperation measure by this European governments that refuse to protect its citizens to make them believe that there's something under control, that they're watching and they're waiting, and also the state of fear plays in very well. And Big Daddy or Big Mammy government can only one who can protect you. The only one who can look after you is Big Daddy, Big Mammy government. And this is the policy of failure. The policy of failure is not to protect you inside the country. If your nation stands for anything, the place they're supposed to protect you is at the frontiers. So the threat doesn't even enter into your nation. But of course, we know what happened with the Syrian refugees. They let them all go into Germany, no background checks, nothing, and they'll see, let's just see what happens. Now, of course, the majority of the Syrian refugees, and I've no problem with Syrian refugees or women, children, or disabled people, or injured in the war, or whatever. I've no problem with those people being taken care of. I'm not a right-wing, ultra-conservative or anything like that. I'm not anti-immigration. I still believe that no matter what, human compassion should be shown. But when you have a situation where it's young men coming in, these have to be carefully checked. That doesn't mean you assume they're all guilty or anything like that, but you still have to check, because you have to secure your nation, not inside its borders, but at the frontiers. This is once that's happened, once you're fighting a war inside your borders, and that's what's happening in Europe, you have already lost. The enemy is not at the gates, the enemy is in the living room. This is the fundamental process here. I'm very much in favor of the idea of a fortress Europe, and that's one of the reasons I think it's great that Trump may become president, and maybe not, but if he did, the idea of him making Fortress America. Just because you have a strong border and a strong immigration and border control system doesn't mean you're anti-immigrants or anti-refugees or anti-people from other countries. It just demonstrates that your priority is the people in your country comes first. That's the first thing. And when you don't have control over your borders, you don't have a nation. That's what defines a nation, is its frontiers, nothing else. Now, there may be countries like Ireland, and Iceland, and Greenland, and a few others, which are very specifically defined by geographic frontiers. such as being surrounded by, water and so on. But that's not the case in most nations. Most nations are territorial winnings or objectives that were picked up in the past, and whatever the machinations of history are, this is what we're left with. This is what we're left with. And the nation is, as I've said in a previous episode of The Velocity of Now, is a kind of a magic circle. When you define your borders and you implement your constitution or your laws, you've created a magic circle, and the ones inside the circle should be protected from any dangers coming from outside the circle. It's a perimeter. It's a fence. It's a security measure, but not in the sense of the idea of security, not in the sense of securing the people inside the frontier, but securing the frontier. And this is where the mess comes from. Now, she's also probably put that message out there that people worried about reservoirs being poisoned or something like that, or some kind of a dirty bomb. Now, when I was growing up, I remember there was a big mythology about the nuke in a suitcase. And all the rag tabloids and everyone else was talking about the nuke in the suitcase. This never existed. A nuclear weapon, an atomic weapon, is incredibly difficult to construct. It's also incredibly difficult to make work. Extremely difficult. This is why so many ICBMs and intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuke warheads were created during the Cold War, because the vast majority of them would fail. People think this is the whole thing, like mutually assured destruction, mad. That they had all these massive amounts of nukes that they could blow the world up 20, 30 times. No, that was because both sides knew that 90% plus of the nukes that they would launch would fail, maybe even 100%. That's why World War III was never going to be a nuclear holocaust, because those bombs would have never exploded. It's literally impossible to set off a nuclear detonation. You look at how they're all set off and under controlled things. They literally need armies of scientists and everything else. This also brings up that idea of the conspiracy theory that there wasn't an atomic weapon detonated over Hiroshima, that it was instead an enormous conventional weapon, an enormous conventional bomb. We'll never know, but it's so difficult to set off, to detonate that warhead. And that's why the whole thing of the dirty bomb the suitcase bomb that we were raised with was all crap. I remember when I was a kid, we were all traumatized by two movies. One was called The Day After Tomorrow. It was an American TV movie where basically it's all about, the Russian nukes coming flying in. And that was all to justify, it's all a propaganda, to justify Ronald Reagan's Star Wars, Defensive Shield. The simple fact is the Star Wars was never, what they put up there was not anything designed to stop Russian war missiles. What was put up there were the US Navy spy satellites. That's what you were watching when you go on Google Map today. It was the spy on us, the spy on you. That's what that was really about. So that movie, The Day After Tomorrow. And then there was another one called When the Wind Came. I think it was an animated cartoon thing. My God, it was extremely disturbing and depressing. About this elderly couple in England during the Third World War, and Britain is devastated by atomic weapons and the like, warheads, and all that's left is this elderly couple are living in a house that's been damaged, but they've survived, and they're trying to keep their best chin up. And they go to try, but what they show is everything fails. They can't make a cup of tea. They can't flush the toilets. They can't, there's rats coming out of the walls, and all of this. They think they can still go down to the shops and buy, buy the newspapers and stuff, and which would be ridiculous anyway. But the rest of the film is this elderly couple slowly dying. as the world falls apart. And it's the most depressing thing you've ever seen. I think David Bowie was involved in it somehow. He did a song for it or something. But it's like that's what we were brought up with. That's what we were raised with, waiting for it to happen. And then in America, before they had like the duck and cover, that kind of thing, ridiculous. But it was all a lie. There never was going to be a nuclear holocaust, for the simple reason that most of the weapons would have not detonated. We were gaslighted. It was just like global warming, ozone layer, the new ice age. They've always given us something to keep us in a state of fear. And one of the few things I would agree with David Icke is that that's true about the whole fear thing. Where you're locked in a state of fear, well, he goes on about the low vibration and all this kind. That's all new age silliness. But you're locked in a low, but you're not. What you put in a position is that you're being gaslighted by the control system, and what they're doing is that you put in such a position you want to be taken care of because you feel like completely helpless. This is the purpose of society and has been probably since for a long time, is that to make society feel helpless, that our leaders, quote unquote, will take care of us. That there's no, that we're totally acquiescent to the system. It's a very dark thing when you think about it. Now, speaking of those of you, I don't know if I'm still back on Facebook, because I'm recording this a bit in advance. If I'm back on Facebook, my God, don't ever lose your Facebook account. I lost the password, and I don't have the email that it was linked to anymore because it was closed. I never used this after that point. My God, they want everything but your DNA to get you back online. It's really annoying. But anyway, speaking of new ageisms, there is this absolute, I'm not going to name them. I'm not going to, you can find them. There's this absolutely, I'm watching channeling videos at the moment. Now, isn't it amazing that most channelers, the 90% of them, are these female ratbags? Do you ever notice that? 90% of women who channel are ratbags. There's nothing nice about them. There's nothing pleasant about them. They're either very superficial or they're just bombastic dregs. They're like they're the kind of women that you'd like. If you were talking to them on a bus and you asked them by the time, you'd expect them to pull out a knife and stab you. They're like those types. And I've been watching these channeling videos because two reasons. One, I'm bored, and secondly, I was bored and I was doing it. And secondly, I wanted to see if there was anything to it, because my attitude toward channeling is these people are either liars, most of them are just liars, or the rest of the delusional psychotics that are hearing the autonomous complex demon inside their head talking to them. And none of it is real. And I still believe that. There is no channeler that's real, with the possible exception, because we have good evidence, of Edgar Cayce. That's the one I would make But I'm not saying channeling isn't real. I'm just saying I haven't seen any proof yet, just like I haven't seen any proof of aliens ever visiting this earth yet. That's not the same thing as saying they don't exist. And we'll have a guy come in now. That's a very narcissistic statement. I'll do it in the Emo Phillips voice. That's a very narcissistic statement to make the assumption that with all the planets in this universe, that we are the only ones with life. No, Dick. What I'm saying is, that's not the same thing as saying they never came here. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. The same thing as my own autonomous complex is currently Emo Phillips inside me. It's not the same thing as them visiting here. And this is where the whole gaslighting, blurring thing, that new thing that's out now about the no forests or no mountains or fucking God knows what on planet Earth, whatever it is this week. I can understand that somehow that's being used to prove that the Earth is flat, even though it doesn't. But yeah, it's whatever agency is behind creating these bullshit things, they link one to the other, so one becomes a self-validating thing of the other. That's why you see like all these like truth gurus, they all start saying the same thing at the same time, because it's like for all their slagging off of the International Monetary Fund and complaining about EU directives, they all meet together and say, well, we'll make the next big thing this, and I'll say this, and you'll say the same thing. And then before you know it, we back each other up and it becomes reality. And that's what that's like. But anyway, I was watching channeling videos, right? Right. Now, there's this one woman. Right, now the one that caught my thing was I was looking through how did I got into this was I was looking at these videos I was looking through any Carl Jung footage of him. I mean actual footage of him speaking that I haven't seen, and I saw the picture of him on the list and it said Carl Jung Afterlife Discussion, and I'm thinking, oh my god, that's a new one. So I go on to that thinking it's going to be Carl Jung talking about life after death, something I hadn't heard, or maybe someone reading from some essay I don't know about, because a lot of stuff, there's still an awful lot out there that we haven't seen. It's held in papers by his in trust and things like that. And so I switch it on, and then these two birds come on, right? And one of them is sitting there going, and the other one's going, I'm really excited to talk to you today. I'm really excited to talk to you today because today you're Carl Jung. Yeah, that's right. I'm Carl Jung. Right, now that's mad enough, right? And she's going. Now the first thing I want to talk, and it's like the split screen in the middle, and it's like these two yentas talking back and forth to one another across the, and the one who's the channeler is like not even in, like when I do the Nicotine Star Child, I go into, oh, hail the Nicotine Star Child. I actually put on a performance. This one was just, I might as well have been talking about knitting or the piles on her arse. She was like, it's like this, like completely like this fake thing going on. And the one says to her, she goes, now love, the one I want to talk about individuation. I've been reading up on Carl Jung, and he talks about something called individuation. Now they've already, a week in advance to decide that next week we're going to pretend to channel Carl Jung. So the wagon who's the channel, she's actually spent time, doing research, watching videos, right? And like individuation, it's like if anyone who's even basically looked at Carl Jung, right? Knows exactly that's a fundamental core of his work. It's like Einstein and relativity, Newton and Principia Mathematica. It's like this is the the opus of the work. And the one's going and she goes, why are you laughing? Because Carl is in a jolly mood. Like this, right? And she goes, now tell us about individuation. Now, individuation. He's gone. It's not about being the individual. Now I sound like Russell Brand. Well, he's kind of untrue. It's not. Oh, I've got to go about him as well too. It's not about being the individual. It's about being one. We are one on a planet. Now that's not individuation in Carl Jung's thing has nothing to do with being an individual in that like sense. But she doesn't even get that right? And then she goes, and then like the one fucking question, right? That if I was the other wagon, the host, and the one fucking question I would have asked would be, Carl, yes, can you speak to us in your native German? No, but they don't do that. Then they say something like, "Oh, I'm a channel, and Carl is talking through me in the only language I know, which is English. The only language I know is English." It's English, right? So it's like, then I look at other videos and some other pictures as well, and there's some fucking one is channeling Andy. You think my Nicotine Star Child channeling is funny? These are even funnier, and they think they're for real. One is channeling Andy Gibb and Jesus Christ. Why Andy Gibb and Jesus? I just want to be your everything. Like, it's like... Now, I just remembered Russell Brand. I got a clip of Russell Brand, right? On, what's the name of that American guy who's a kung fu guy? who has a radio show. I can't remember him. He's always has Graham Hancock on. You know the guy. I can't remember him, but he had Russell Brand on, and Russell was talking about, well, see, like if you go into mythology, right? This is he's probably heard this from some douchebag in Hollywood, but now he's an expert on mythology, and he goes, Joseph Campbell, drop the fucking Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung said about this, that when you go into the forest, it's like going into the subconscious, and the same thing at the bottom of the sea, it's like going to the subconscious. So I left a comment on it, and I said, next my pet budgie, Eric, will be discussing the complexities of the failures of the Deutschmark in the post World War II GDR during the first 6 months. And it's just something like my budgie would be talking about this, because that's how sincere he came on. And so I know I should be talking about this guy after all this time, but he's so fucking fake. He's so fake. And you have all these people like, oh, Russell is so intelligent. He's so intelligent. He knows all about these things that no one else knows about. And, you could just hear that conversation probably from some bint in Hollywood, or some Hollywood producer, some Hollywood party where some, let's not talk about the weather. Let's talk about climate change. Let's try to look like we're erudite and sophisticated, and not a bunch of like idiots who are paid vast amounts of sums for what tiny little talent we have. No. I saw a video last week about Joseph Campbell, and that's how it all began. And then he goes on the internet. He goes, Joseph Campbell. He's not the man who makes the soup. No, he's not the man. And it's Carl Jung, not Carl Jung, not Will Jung like me. Assumptions against him. I mean, if the aliens do exist, at this stage, I probably wouldn't have any problem with exterminating us. If this is what's out there, you have wagons who channel fucking yentas who channel Jesus Christ, Andy Gibb, and Carl Jung, and then I do the same as the Nicotine Star Child for a joke, and they do it for real. You cannot tell the difference. And now you have Feckin' Russell Brand is now an expert on comparative mythology, and this is the world we live in today. This is the world we live in today. How did this happen? And then everyone else has a fucking safe space, right? A safe space. Everyone has a safe space, right? Why is it that everyone has a safe space except me? Why can I not get a safe space to be safe from all these bastards? That's what I want. I want a safe space to be safe from all these bastards, but I can't have it. So I have to listen to them. I have to listen to them. And then the innate conversation, like you're on a train or something, right? And the innate conversation. Did you see the Fit movie last night? No, which one? Oh, I thought it was very good. What's the name of it? Don't remember. What was it about? Don't remember. Who was in it? Don't remember. Then how did you know it was very good? Because it was preventing my outfit from talking to me. This is like what they're like out there. Don't know. I'm frightened. Everything that's different frightens me. Everything that's different. Except my daughter, who has two eyebrows that look like electrical insulation, black electrical insulation tape stuck on her, and lips that look like the rind of an orange, a piece of an orange stuck in there, two of them. And my son, who has genes that are so skinny that his sperm is actually flying out of his ear holes, and he has a lumberjack shirt and a lumberjack beard, and he can't even change a plug or change a fuse or change a light bulb because he can't leave his safe space, even though he's dressed like a cross between Grizzly Adams and Freddie Mercury. But they're great kids. My kids are great. My daughter, she has 4 kids from 4 fellas. My son, he has sperm coming out of his ears and a beard down to his bollocks, and he can't do anything. But they're great kids. Why? Well, because they look like everybody else's kids. That's why they're great. Oh, then they're fantastic. And you're one down the street, right? Miriam, you know her? Yeah. Did you know her son doesn't have sperm flying out of his ears because his trousers are too tight and doesn't have a beard down to his bollocks? No. He doesn't follow fashions. He's not obsessed with television and football. And he doesn't do what everyone else does. And what does he look like? Well, he's quite handsome and good looking. Fucking weirdo. Someone should have him arrested. This is what they're like. This is what they've turned. This is what we're dealing with now. Let me have a look at the news. Let me see where I'll go to InfoWars, right? I was amazed to find out that Alex Jones is only 42 years of age. That's unbelievable. He's like, it's still like, I mean, what was he, like 6 when he started InfoWars? That's amazing that he was that young. I thought he was like in his 50s. Anyway, what's on InfoWars? Look now. This will be a bit backwards, so I'm recording this like a week or so in advance. I'm not that long, but it could be a few days. Venezuela's steep prices, scarcities open way for cardboard coffins. Bio coffins are becoming a viable option because of high prices for wooden coffins and a shortage of brass ones. So, what difference does it make to you if you're buried in a wooden one or a cardboard one? What difference does that make? You see, this is like a non-story. I mean, it'd be one thing if they were saying that things were so bad they were dumping them in the streets, but they're burying them in cardboard coffins. Cardboard coffin doesn't sound too bad when you think about it. Compared, to me, a cardboard coffin doesn't sound too bad at all. All these corrugations in it. Unbelievable. Brexit pioneer destroys Hillary Clinton. Nigel Farage joins Donald Trump in Mississippi to speak to American voters. I didn't know he was a Brexit pioneer. Here's a good one. Assassination attempt on Angela Merkel foiled as armed man arrested trying to infiltrate German Chancellor's motorcade in Prague. Wasn't there there was a very famous SS officer who was killed in Prague. History really repeat. Oh, I want to talk about this one. The at least 241 dead in these Italian earthquakes. I don't know if anybody else experienced this, but before those Italian earthquakes happened, I don't know how it was in your part of the world, but here it felt like we were being microwaved. I've never felt anything like it. The air was completely stagnant. There was no, and we had a kind of a humid summer here, but this was different. The air was stagnant. There was no energy except this crushing sense of something burning us, coming down upon you. And it happened right in the middle of those Italian earthquakes. And they do say that earthquakes are caused by solar flares. And then when I heard, and there's around the same time Merkel said, Germans must get 10 days of water and food. And I was thinking of some kind of massive EMF expulsion had come from the sun. And she was basically telling them to stock up because there'd be no electricity deliveries or anything until they got the system working again. I can tell you something. If we ever got hit by an EMF blast, it would be more damaging than 10 days. It might be 10 years before we were even back to like running again. Forget normal. And this is the thing. They're making electronic appliances more and more fragile and more subject to the dangers of electromagnetic frequency and pulses from EMP from the sun. They've never been more fragile. So, it's not like I can remember when the MiG jet was shot down, or no, someone captured a MiG jet. I think it was the South Koreans, and the Americans were making fun of the Russians, Soviets at the time, and they're saying inside of our American jets are all high tech electronics. The inside of the MiGs are all things like vacuum tubes and relays, basic analog electronics. And the Russians replied by, yeah, that's not because we can't make that stuff. If you detonated an EMP bomb over Russia, we'd still be able to take our jets off because there wouldn't. If we had detonated one over the United States and they had a blast of EMP, you couldn't because all the electronics in your jets would fail, and that shut them up pretty quickly. I remember that. We're analog electronics. See, this is why I talked about the digital gym. This idea. Look, let me explain to you how unnatural. This is when you hear a new age, you go, we're a 5 cents digital computer. Fuck you, we are not. We are analog. We are an analog receiver and transmitter, an electromechanical, electrobiological machine entity with a soul, be driving a soul, a ghost driving it. We're not digital. If you were to get a radio telescope, now let the profundity of this sink into your heads. If you were to get a radio telescope and you were to point it into space with the specific intention of finding a digital signal, the only place in the entire universe to date where a digital transmission will be picked up is on this planet. Nowhere else. Now, those of you who have seen my talk, I think it was at AV6, I spoke about the digital djinn. Go look for it, Ragnarok and the digital djinn. And I spoke about how the digital signal, the digital electronics, although it's given us all these fantastic computers and everything, we've lost something. It's almost like when Carl Jung, at the opening intro of Man and His Symbols, there's an essay called On Approaching the Unconscious, and he talks about the idea of a bush soul, which would be our subconscious mind, and talk about how man, modern Western man, has moved into his conscious mind. And although this has given him great intellectual faculties and capabilities, he has developed complexes as a result, where the indigenous people down in their subconscious mind, they don't have complexes. This is why the same old adage comes up over and over again when they say, like, the more money and the more successful people become, the more unhappy they become. That's absolutely true. If you look at the suicide rates in the West, they're all in the richest countries. They're all in the highest levels of antidepressants. They're all in the richest countries, because wealth creates complexes, and complexes rob us of the initial bush soul underneath. The bush soul underneath, which is now our subconscious to Western man, it would still be de facto in the remote tribes that have either hardly been touched or barely been communicated with. And Carl Jung, in that essay on Approaching the Unconscious, talks about having met these tribes in Mali who don't dream, and he explained what dreams to them were, explaining what dreams were. And they said, we don't dream. Our holy man, our shaman, dreams. Our chief dreams on our behalf. That's very similar to how that things functioned at the time of the Druids. The Druids used to dream on behalf, well, not so much on behalf, but they were sort of like representative dreamers of the clan, of the tribal grouping. So they would make decisions on who would be king, certain issues that have to be solved, healings and so on. It was not shamanism. This was basic sleeping. It wasn't like they took hallucinogenics or they danced. They went to sleep, usually after taking a big meal of a freshly slaughtered bull. And so that's when Carl Jung met these guys in Mali. They said, our chieftain doesn't dream anymore either. And they says, why not? And he says, the British colonial governor now does that for us. which showed that they didn't even have the faculties, the psychic faculties, to exist in the modern world. Not saying there's anything wrong with them; they're probably better off than us, but they didn't get there for that reason. This is a very deep thing when we start thinking about it, the idea of a conscious and an unconscious mind, and mankind in the West being very much a victim of it. Now, the digital idea is almost like the next step. This is why they needed this for transhumanism. This is why I firmly believe, I'm not at all, I won't say firmly believe, but I'm not at all adverse to the idea of what people call archons or some other group behind the scenes infecting the minds of these scientists and these like transhumanists to make them develop more and more things like this, even things like GMOs and stuff like that. This is why they want to make the earth as unnatural as possible, as unnatural to human life and biology. Everything is split genes, GMO, the whole thing. Crossbreeds, not even crossbreeds, but like split genes. It's quite different than crossbreeds. They want Earth not like Earth, and there will be a point where nature would rebel, because we're talking about, we don't even know what the consciousness is, how it works. These people are already planning to replace it. These are sick people, very sick people, and you cannot relate to them. And just like you cannot relate to lots of people, because I've been telling you to not try to wake others up. The best thing is to understand what's going on, because it's not going to happen. 99 times out of 10, they will laugh in your face or ignore you because you're frightened them. And the ones who do listen, well, what's the point? There's nothing they can do about it. The numbers are so small. It's happening anyway. Recently, I kind of did a kind of a kind of divination / magic ritual / consciousness experiment, where I put this idea out there using tarot cards of like how we were going to solve the psychopathic control grid, how we're going to deal with all these cults, how we're going to deal with all these transhumanists. And over again, the judgment card came up. Now, the judgment card represents being judged for your life, salvation, the calling. And basically what I got from this was, it'll be all sorted. We don't have to worry about what's going to happen in the future, because more likely than not, nature will find a correction. Nature will correct these anomalies, these mutations, these digital jinns amongst us. And so that made me feel a lot better, even though I don't know if it's true or not, it's going to happen, but it made me feel an awful lot better. It made me feel an awful lot better. The drive for this is a perversity. The drive to transcend life and the nature of things is a perversity. The root of that perversity is not inherently in human beings. It is almost like a collective autonomous complex that has developed within the high-tech Western human mind. And humans have, from day one, right? From day one, humans have long sought for a more complex relationship with natural forces of the earth and the cosmos as a whole, rather than being, we wanted to be, we took up this challenge. It was almost as if we possessed this innate knowledge that our conscious minds were awake, and that within the human psyche, we contained within us the means to decode the mysteries of the universe, which we probably did. But decoding the mysteries of the universe and altering the universe are two very different things. Scientifically altering it. We didn't only in the West, we did not only want to understand the operating system underlying all creation, but within us there was also the means to hack it and hack into that operating system. And this is where the digital aspect came in. The ability was not only to get inside the mind of God, but to become gods ourselves. Natural cycles of birth, death, decay and renewal, they gave the earliest ancestors, our earliest human ancestors, they gave them these insights into the cyclical mechanics of the universe. They got these insights from that and the natural world. So this is where the ideas of sun male, moon female, moon was related to. That's another thing. I'll name his name. David Icke has everyone terrified of two things: reptiles and the moon. And this is a perversity. The reptile or the serpent represents the subconscious wisdom of the man and the woman, the subconscious awareness leading us back to our purest form. The snake travels from below up inside us, and the serpent brings us wisdom. This is why the first thing that the monotheistics, the Abrahamics, attacked was the serpent in the Garden of Eden. So to attack the serpent is to attack, and the reptilian, and place fear on them, is to place fear upon that which makes us wondrous, which makes us strive for difference, which makes us transcend dictatorial values. Remember, the serpent told Eve not to be bullied by this bastard up in the sky. The serpent was the friend of mankind. The serpent didn't punish man. Yahweh punished man. And the other thing he has people afraid of is the moon. The moon is a big reptilian spaceship that's been pulled here. And what's the evidence he uses? The Russian Space Academy determined that it was a spaceship or was artificial. Bull fucking shit. If you actually go and look what that's based on, this was a hypothesis. All the time scientists put out these ideas to test them, not to prove that they're right or wrong, but they become discourses and tangents into a sort of a philosophical debate regarding ideas. So they might suggest something. Can an atom go fishing? Can a river be conscious? Can a tennis ball pass through the netting on a tennis racket without breaking it? And is the moon artificial? That's not the same thing as they proved it. And then they go on the thesis and the hypothesis, and they work upon this and develop the idea. But they don't prove the moon is a spaceship. Now, the reason we know about this is because this came out during the Cold War. And it was put in there by the popular media to make it look like that Russian scientists were mentally ill, that they were a bunch of goons who thought the moon was a spaceship. And this is the so-called proof used for that. That's what it is. A outlandish theory put out there to test philosophical ideas regarding theorems. And to make it even worse, this so-called Russian Academy of Science was not all these Soyuz and great engineers and scientists. It was like a club. It was like a science club, like a radio club, like a ham radio club. That's what it was. Now, discounting all that, the moon, to me, whenever I see the moon, I feel beautifully calmed. The moon regulates the tides. The moon regulates a woman's menstrual cycle. The most beautiful thing I saw recently was the crescent moon rising above Knocknashee, the Hill of the Fairies. A sliver of a moon rising. And it was almost like a surgeon's knife of the subconscious. The beauty of it, the transcendental awesomeness of it. And yet we're told that that's an evil spaceship that's keeping us trapped. Shame on anyone who would push that idea out there. Shame on anyone who would disparage the mechanisms of female beauty and female thought. Shame on them. Now, that's why the sun became the male aspect and the female became the lunar aspect. And you have that in the tarot. You have the major arcana, and that leads for up to the Wheel of Fortune, which is where the can strikes midnight. That's the male aspect, and it falls onto the lunar aspect, female aspect, descending down towards the world card. Human beings from the this earliest incarnation, they knew that the natural world responded to the paradox of both salvation and destruction. Nature can heal and consume us. Plants of wellness and plants of toxicity. You can be cured or poisoned by different plants. And humans, by whatever path brought us to this point, has long sought to be more complex in this relationship than just hapless bystanders subject to these paradoxes. Our nature was to seek to step outside its causality, almost like a desire for a musician to stand apart from the orchestra and become the conductor. But just like the conductor, when you're holding your baton or your wand, even though you're in charge of the orchestra, you cannot compensate for an instrument which might go out of tune, or say a celloist who drops their bow during a crucial point in a musical movement. Having said that, once the baton is raised and you have committed yourself to being the conductor, then the performance has to go on until the last note in the finale, because it's like any other magical act. The ritual must be brought to its closure, and no spell can ever be left unfinished. And this is why the transhumanists, I think, are failed, because they cannot bring their spell to conclusion. This is why all phonies fail, because phonies don't close their magic circle. They throw an idea out there that seems at first supportable, and then it's not supportable. So rather than saying I was wrong, or I'm full of shit, or it doesn't work, they add a bandage of a secondary and a tertiary and so on extra added theory, an idea on top of that, to try and smother the obvious, which was the initial idea was groundless. And you can see that in people's faces. If you see a person who's living a lie, whether they're a member of a cult or a cult leader or a Catholic priest or any kind of cleric who knows what they're saying to their congregation is bullshit, you can see that distortion in their faces. They won't be like me telling jokes and having a laugh and all this kind of thing. They'll be very serious, and they're like a spring that's wound up too tightly, and you see it in their faces, because rather than admitting that stage one was bullshit, they hid the failures of stage one with stage two, and then they hid the failures of stage two with stage three, and on into infinitum until they're twisted and angry and bitter, and they're lashing out, because what they're doing is they're avoiding their own individuation. They're constantly creating magic spells and magic circles that they're not closing. What they're doing is they're leaving them open, and then they're building a new one on top of it. It's how a child's mind reacts when the parent says to the child, "Did you drink that milk?" No, they did. They never get out of that stage. It goes through them all their lives. And then the aspect of blame comes in. These people who blame, whose lives have failed for whatever reason, or they've scooped the bullshit upon the bullshit upon the bullshit. They have to lash out and they become obsessive. This is one of the reasons why I get so many people who contact me saying, I have a problem with a psychopathic uncle or a psychopathic boss or a psychopathic partner, or I'm damaged by this or I'm damaged with this. Can you give me counseling? And I always say, no, never, sorry. And the reason for this is very wise, because it's not that I don't care. It's just that I can't protect myself. This is what Freud called transference. You see, this is one of the major problem with psychoanalysis is transference. And it also happens with confession in churches and so on, and having gurus and heroes. What happens is when you counsel someone, if I'm counseling someone through one of these problems they contact with me with, what they're doing in a sense is handing their entire existence over to me. That's what they're doing. They're handing their entire existence over to me. And so by default, as the counselor, I become a kind of a god. And what happens to someone who has a god? They either end up worshipping them or they end up hating them. And this is only on both states both states of what Freud called transference are really bad in this thing. And this is why counselors and psychoanalysis and people like that go through years of training to how to try and offset the fundamental problem of psychoanalysis and counseling, and this is transference. This is the idea of the female patient of the psychiatrist falling in love with the psychiatrist. The Catholic girl in rural Ireland or Italy or Portugal or Spain falling in love with the Catholic priest taking the confession, because you've handed yourself over. You said, here's me. Take me into your hands. And that's a dangerous thing. That's a dangerous, dangerous thing. That's why I'm always telling you, never, ever follow any guru, not, especially me. Nobody. I don't want you. And it's not because I don't care. It's because I don't have the means to protect myself from you. I just don't. If you develop a pathological reaction to this transference, like feeling I abandoned you, or feeling I let you down, or feeling I didn't solve the problem for you, or you put me up on a pedestal, this is not my fault, but yet I have to live with the consequences. And this is why when people contact me saying, Thomas, can you help me with this problem I have with a psychopath? Well, firstly, I say, you don't know if it's a psychopath or not, okay? You're probably just putting that label on this person. Could be, but I'm just saying maybe you're not. And secondly, I don't need the burdens of your transference. I'm not trained for it, and I don't want it. I've done enough. I put my books and my videos and my ideas out there. Drink from that well if you choose, or what you need, and then move on. This is you, and also transference has another dangerous aspect, is that it prevents your own individuation from taking place. So if you're hung up on the idea that some particular person, work situation, or anything like this is what's causing the problems in your life, you will never attain individuation, because you're stuck in a kind of a holding pattern of transference where you've transferred it over to someone who didn't help you. And that's because you don't want to, or you don't know how to help yourself. And the same thing happens with this knowledge. When you find out about conspiracies and stuff, you go all mad, because what you're doing is what happens is you become almost like a transference to yourself, and you start to see yourself as the possessor of some kind of arcane knowledge or some kind of special knowledge. It's how cults are kept in check. They all believe they have special secrets. You know, these awful born-again Christians, I know something you don't. I'm going to be saved and you're not. They will never attain individuation, ever. You never take what anyone says for granted. If they say, go check it yourself, guess what? Go check it yourself. And don't check a site that they refer to. Check all the sources, all the info, and then make your own decision. Because a lot of times when they say, if you don't believe me, check for yourself, what they're really saying is, don't bother checking. And you won't. Because you're bought off by this. If you don't believe me, go check yourself. And this is important. This is very important. Now I'm getting all philosophically and Sunday-ish here. Speaking of Sunday-ish, we've had this scandal in Ireland recently, whereby at the top seminary, Monomyth in County Kildare, they found out that all the seminarians, all the young priests in training, not all of them, but lots of them were using the Grindr app, which I found out is a gay pickup dating app. And all these priests, all these young men were using Grindr inside the seminary, these young priests in training, to pick up guys on the outside. And now they're being watched during meal times. This is not a failure of the Catholic Church, nothing does. They're now being watched during meal times to make sure they're not using their mobile phones to go on Grindr. Now, you would think that years ago in Ireland, when a fellow was gay or a woman was a lesbian, they used to join the priesthood and the nuns. They used to join it to hide. But Ireland is the most liberal nation when it comes to all that stuff now. We were the first nation in the world to vote through same-sex marriages, same-sex unions through a popular referendum. First nation on earth to do it, and it was by 2-1 margin. It was massive. So the days of being, these fellas, I just don't understand. Why is it easier to live a lie and become a Catholic priest than to hide your homosexuality from your parents or your family? Why is that easier than actually being gay? That's what I don't get. Maybe 30 years ago I could understand it, but I can't understand it now. But anyway, they're all using the Grindr app. Now, this is because they'll never be truly spiritual. They didn't join the priesthood because they wanted to become spirit priests and they wanted to help the community. They wanted to seek some kind of affinity with God's work. They joined the priesthood to hide their homosexuality. So they will never achieve the individuation of a spiritual soul. They will never attain that. Not, here they are like taking confessions, and in the confession box they're on Grindr, sending dick pics or whatever, which is their own business. I have no problem with any priest having a sex life. Doesn't bother me. But it should bother them, because what they're doing is they're lying to themselves. Lying to themselves. But that was amazing. And then now they have the indignity of the bishop walking around the seminary, looking over their shoulders to see who they're talking to or who they're texting, to make sure they're not on the app, the gay dating app. It's just amazing. It's just amazing that human beings have this capacity to deny reality. But then we're dealing with a cult type aspect. In cults you'll have, like back to channeling, some bombastic bitch telling that these things are going to happen and these comets are coming, and all these weak males all around her, hanging on to her, and every single thing that's predicted doesn't happen, or else it's vaguely attributed to the channeling. And not one of them is man enough to say this is bullshit and walk out. To go in that deep where there's no way back. To go in that deep where there's no way back. And that's what happens in the alternative scene as well. They go in so deep that they don't think that they can go back, and they can. Listen to me right now. If you fell for the flat earth thing and you now think it's bullshit, cool. I won't judge you. You woke up, you learned from your mistakes. If you believed in all kinds of nonsense, you later on found, like the worst one for me is it will always be these crisis. That's as bad. I'm not really bothered by the flat earth thing, but I'm really bothered by the crisis actor one. The idea that these people are murdered in cold blood and laughing at them and going, ha ha ha, crisis actor, like that TV reporter and the other woman in America were gunned down by a cameraman, and everyone laughing and joking, crisis actor. And that the lack of any kind of compassion for those murders, and that stupid image of the girl with the phone. Look, she's everywhere again. There's a completely different girl in each photograph. That's much worse. That's the worst of all. That's because there's no decency there. There's no compassion, none. And I could go on forever about this stuff. I mean, I'm convinced that a lot of this stuff, like the crisis actor thing, it goes back to the intelligence services. Goes back to the cults who are running alt media on behalf of the intelligence services, because these things always appear as wildfire, fully developed ideas, and they're put out there almost like a product launch, and that shows the intelligence services are behind it all. Just like when the attacks on me in 2012, all from the same different sources, all the same time, and doing the same thing. Intelligence services they were their handlers behind the scenes. We had them all programmed and ready to go. It was not long after I called Tony Blair a psychopath. I knew right away, and so many other people knew right away when it was happening, what was going down. It was a carefully planned attack. Because when you're the real thing, it will happen. It will happen to you. But it's okay. It's okay. This is part of the journey. This is part of the experience. This is part of the moving on, the going on. I've been let down and disappointed and betrayed and by so many people in the scene. I'd have to say, before I go that far, I'd have to say that 75% of people involved in this alt movement scene are wonderful people. 25% of the scum of the earth. And there's so many people have let me down and betrayed me, stabbed me in the back, and all I did was approach them in good faith and kindness. And wanting to work together. That's all I wanted. When you see that this so-called awakened community is just as rotten to its core as the mainstream community, you have to be very careful, because that can throw some people into total states of despondency. It's like I said at the creativity thing. You don't have to be discovered because you already discovered yourself. And when you wake up, and you wake up to the fact you were talking shite or following the wrong person, that's okay. That's part of the experience. You're learning. But you shouldn't fall out despondent from the whole thing. Because, if we delivered our lives like that, we'd never get anything done. Anything done. We're the jump ship that easy. When your guru or your hero fails you, remember that pain and that anger is not directed at them. It's directed at yourself. See you Thursday night. Thank you.